Welcome to Bring on the Sunshine, Shining Light on Autism Spectrum Disorders, an overview of ASD. The purpose of this session is to review the characteristics of Autism Spectrum Disorder, ASD. What is Autism Spectrum Disorder? Autism spectrum disorder is a developmental disability characterized by deficits in social communication and interaction, along with restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activities. It is present in early developmental periods, but may not become fully manifested until later on. Many times due to social demands, or many times it's masked by learned strategies earlier in life. The characteristics cause significant impairments in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. ASD is made up of two areas: deficits in social communication and interaction, and restricted repetitive behaviors. We'll talk more about what this may look like. These will always be areas of deficit to a greater or lesser degree in all individuals with autism. First, let's take a look at deficits in social communication and interaction. There are three areas where you may see this deficit. First is social reciprocity. This could be noticed or usual during social initiations or lack of social initiations, or in younger children, we may see using others as a tool. This could be also shown in the lack of normal back and forth conversations. And it could look more like a failure to respond, especially when a name is called, or it could look like one-sided conversations, really more like monologues. Also, the lack of sharing of interest. For example, a young child may look at a piece of trash on the sidewalk and pick it up and come show it to you. But a child with autism typically will not come show you that trash. They may pick it up and they may study it for themselves. You may also see a lack of sharing emotions or affect, and a lack of responsive social smile, lack of sharing joy with others, no pleasure in social situations. And a child with autism may initiate to get help, but not for social interaction. There's also a failure to engage in simple social games. Next, you may see some deficits in nonverbal communicative behaviors. These include things such as eye contact, body language, lack of understanding or using gestures, unusual facial expressions, and interpreting facial expressions, so lack of interpretation of those expressions. We'll talk later a little bit more about this. Finally, there is also a deficit in developing and maintaining relationships, mostly appropriate to the developmental age. There's also a lack of ability in taking someone else's perspective. They may not notice another's lack of interest in an activity, and individuals with autism may have a lack of social response to social cues, ask socially inappropriate questions, and may not notice others. Some other things that you may notice is a limited use of gestures, delayed speech or no social babbling, the making of odd sounds or unusual tones of voices, difficulty using eye contact, gestures, and sounds all at the same time, little or no pretending or imitating others, Maybe you may notice that the individual has stopped using words when they used to be able to say words. And also, as mentioned earlier, using another person as a tool, specifically another person's hand as a tool to communicate, grab, and look for things. You may also notice that this individual does not look right at people, or it's hard to get them to look at you. They do not share warm, joyful expressions and may not respond when someone calls their name. You may also notice that that individual does not draw your attention to things or show you things they're interested in, and does not share enjoyment or interest with others. Again, the areas that we have deficits in autism spectrum disorders is deficits in social communication and interaction, which we just reviewed, and restrictive repetitive behavior. Let's take a closer look at restricted repetitive behavior and what that may look like. You may see repetitive behavior in speech, an insistence on sameness, wanting the same thing over and over again, fixated interest, and sensory differences. For example, you may notice unusual ways of moving their hands, fingers, or whole body. Also, you may notice that the individual develops rituals such as lining objects up or repeating things over and over and over again. Also, you may notice that they are very focused on or attached to unusual kinds of objects. An expressive interest in particular objects, actions, or activities that interferes with social interaction. You may notice some unusual sensory interests, such as sniffing objects or looking out of the corner of an eye. Also, you may notice an over or underreaction to certain sounds, textures, or other sensory input. It is important to note that autism is a spectrum, and the characteristics of ASD are not the same across individuals. Each student with ASD has different strengths, interests, and dreams. It is said that if you have ever met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. It is important for us to understand and identify the characteristics of ASD and the characteristics of the disability, but we must keep in mind that the individual comes first. Let's look at some reflection questions. First, think about a student that you're currently serving or have served that is a student with ASD. Do you have the student in mind? Now, how does that person exhibit the characteristics of ASD? And how does it affect their day at school? Reflecting on these questions and learning more about the characteristics of the disability will allow us to better serve our students and implement strategies to be able to support them during their school experience.